Hi everybody, this is Jeremy Siskind here. This is my book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And today we're going to go on a pretty deep dive on the octatonic scale, also known as the diminished scale. Hopefully, by the end of this session, you'll have a really good, deep understanding about what the octatonic scale is. I'm going to show you how it works, what chords it goes with. I'm going to show you some licks for the octatonic scale. I'm going to show you some voicings to use with the octatonic scale. I'm going to explain what a double diminished chord is. I'm going to show you some different ways that you can create your own licks using the octatonic scale. We're going to go over a lot of stuff. Buckle your seatbelt. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. But I hope that you find something new in here for you. Here we go. So the octatonic scale, I said, is also known as the diminished scale. And the key to this scale is that it alternates whole steps and half steps. And because it alternates whole steps and half steps, we have two versions. One starting with a half step, which we call the half-whole octatonic. One starting with a whole step that we call the whole half octatonic. Okay, so let's look at this C half-whole octatonic. So it starts with a half step from C to D flat, and then a whole step from D flat to E flat, and continues alternating. We generally use this scale with chords that have an altered ninth. A flat 9 or a sharp 9. And actually, I didn't write this in, but let me do it for you now. Let's look at the tones of this scale. So it has the root, the flat 9, the sharp 9, the third. This F sharp is like the sharp 11 or the flat 5. The G is the 5th, the A is the 13th, and then the B is the dominant 7th. So you get three beautiful altered tones. The flat 9, the sharp 9, and then that sharp 11th or flat 5th. So it's a really colorful, rich sound that we love using on dominant chords. Now I say that we can use it on dominant chords with an altered ninth, but as pianists, we can alter the ninth of basically any dominant chord. Unless, for example, the ninth is in the melody or it's really key to the sound of that piece to have the ninth unaltered. We are welcome and encouraged to alter the ninth. So we can use this half-whole octatonic scale a ton because we can use it on just about any dominant. So if I'm playing a 2-5-1, on that dominant chord, I use the C half-whole octatonic. I'm playing G minor, C half-whole, and then resolving to F. Now, just a word about notation, because it gets a little confusing for those of you who have a good classical theory background. So generally, in any kind of theoretical context, we're not supposed to have more than one of any note. But this is called the octatonic scale because there are 8 notes, which of course in itself is unusual. Usually scales have 7 notes. And so here we have to double up one of the notes. And I am not aware of any theoretician who has said it must be this note that must be doubled up. So for me, I try to write it in the least confusing possible way so here I doubled up on E's. I have an E flat and an E natural because I didn't want to use an F flat because that would probably just make it hard to read. So I'm not really that specific about, exactly how you name each note of that octatonic scale. For the whole half octatonic, we start with a whole step from C to D, and then go to half step, E flat, F. And this goes with a diminished chord. And I have this stupid little mnemonic device where a diminished chord, the little circle, looks like a hole in the ground. So it goes with the whole half octatonic. So if you have trouble remembering, know that the C diminished goes with whole half because that looks like a hole. So if we have our C diminished chord, we'll go over this in more detail later, but notice that we have all 4 of the notes of that C diminished chord. our standard scale to go with a C diminished chord. Now, it's going to be really important as we kind of get through this video to realize that this is what's called a symmetrical scale. So a symmetrical scale means that there's a repeating intervallic pattern. And when things repeat, that means that we can start them at different points and come to the same set of notes. So a famous symmetrical scale is the whole tone scale, right? So the whole tone scale repeats the simplest interval pattern. It's just a whole tone again and again and again, right? And that means that no matter where we start the whole tone scale, we're gonna get another whole tone scale, right? If we start the whole tone scale, the C whole tone scale on a D with that same set of pitches, but just from D to D, we get the D whole tone scale. If we take that same set of pitches and we start it on E, we get the E whole tone scale. And it makes sense because the intervals stay the same no matter where we start. And so it's not quite so simple with the octatonic, but we're repeating the same intervals every 2 notes. And we have one half step and one whole step. And if you put those two together, they make a minor third. So at every minor third interval, we're going to get the same set of pitches. So if you look here at my little diagram, you'll see that the C half whole has the same pitches as the E flat half whole, has the same pitches as the F half whole, has the same pitches as the A half whole. And if you think about it, and I didn't diagram this out, but I'll do it now, it makes sense because we know that diminished chords themselves, which repeat in minor thirds, they can have any of the notes as the root of the chord, right? And the pitches don't change. So this is a symmetrical chord, a diminished 7th chord, right? C diminished, E flat diminished, F sharp diminished, and A diminished should technically be spelled differently. I think I actually did it very poorly on the E diminished. On a couple of them, actually, I did it poorly. But they all have the same pitches. And so, by the way, if you've never thought about this, diminished chords are fantastic for modulating because, if let's say we're in the key of B flat major, the diminished chord native to that key would be A diminished, the 7 diminished 7th, right? But if we take that 7 diminished 7th and instead of resolving it from A diminished to B flat major, we could think of it as an F sharp diminished, just with an A on bottom. And then it resolves beautifully as the 7 diminished 7th to G, right? Or think of it as an E flat diminished 7th, which is the 7th diminished 7th, 7 diminished 7th of E. So these diminished 7ths can be portals to other keys. And similarly, I know I'm getting a little bit off track, but I don't care. It's my YouTube channel. Who cares? These half whole scales, these could go with any of those 4 diminished 7ths that are a minor third apart. But to make matters even more convenient, depending on how you look at it, confusing, is that if we think about it, we're alternating half whole, half whole. So it makes sense that if we start on all of the odd numbered notes in the scale, like we just did, the first note, the third note, the 5th note, the 7th note, we get our half whole scale again. If we start on the even number notes of the scale, we actually get to a whole half scale, right? Because we're starting with a whole step and then we're starting alternating whole steps and half steps. So that C half whole, those same pitches, if we start them different places, are equal to D flat, E, G, and B flat whole half. And I didn't write B flat because I ran out of room. Okay. And let's just look at this little diagram right here. It's simple, but it's also somewhat profound. This is a little voicing for a C7 flat 9, right? So you can see we have the root, we have the 7th, we have the flat 9th, we have the 3rd, we have the 5th. Very standard voicing. If we take only the right hand, look what chord we get. It's D flat diminished, or B flat diminished, or E diminished, or G diminished. You can see I can do this, I can rattle this off really fast because after a long time, a couple decades playing jazz, we know these minor third relationships. They're really important to being a jazz player. So if you're not familiar with these concepts, it's really time to start getting familiar with them. Now, what this means, which is the good news for you, is that there's actually only 3 sets of pitches that make up all of the octatonic scales, right? I know this looks like chaos. Who would take notes like this? So our first set of pitches is this one that I just showed you. I'm using this notation HW to mean half whole and WH to mean whole half. So that doesn't mean homework. It means the half whole scale. So C, E flat, F sharp, A half whole, go with D flat, E, G, B flat, whole half. And so you can use the same fingering on all of these. And my preferred fingering is to put my thumb on C, G, and E. Yes, there's no way that I can figure out to avoid crossing over 3 times. I should say that's my right hand fingering. I like having my thumb on A in the left hand. For the other 2, though, we can just have one crossover. So our second group is as follows: D flat, E, G, B flat, half whole, go with D, F, A flat, B, whole half. And here our thumbs can just go on B and F. It's kind of fun to play a scale where you can go 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, right? So F 2 3 4, B 2 3 4, F 2 3 4, B 2 3. That's my preferred fingering anyway. And you can also have your thumb on B and F for the third group, where we'd have D, F, A flat, B, half whole, going with E flat, G flat, A, and C. Oh, I did that wrong, whole half. Glad I caught it before anybody else did. And so same thing. No. And so those thumbs can go there with both the right hand and the left hand. Okay. A really nice way to think about these, 8 notes is a lot, and it's a pretty hard one to hear if you're not used to hearing it. If you're used to somebody kind of who just trusts their ear. So a nice way to think about this is it has 2 minor tetrachords separated by a tritone. I know that sounds really fancy, but let me explain it to you. A tetrachord is a 4-note group, and we count it as the first 4 notes of a scale. So minor tetrachord is going to be the first 4 notes of a minor scale. And I know there's a lot of different minor scales, but none of them have different notes in the first 4 notes. It's always the 6th and 7th notes that create problems here. So separated by a tritone means that they're an augmented 4th or a diminished 5th apart. Those are the same thing, augmented 4th or diminished 5th. So in this C half whole here, if we ignore that C, we have a minor tetrachord in D flat, and then a minor tetrachord in G. Kind of nifty. For the C half whole, we can start right on the C, and we have a C minor tetrachord, followed by a G flat minor tetrachord. I'll show you a different way to think about these chords, which is that they're actually made up of 2 interlocking diminished 7ths. So again, I know this looks very busy, but what I'm trying to show you is this every other note, if we put them together, makes a diminished 7th chord. So I put all of the red circled notes together into this red chord here, and we get C diminished 7th. And then I put all the blue notes, the even notes, numbered notes in the scale, into the blue chord, which is D flat diminished 7th. So here I'll show you. I'm playing with my left hand, I'm playing the C. With my right hand, I'm playing the D flat. And we can actually use this principle that there's these two diminished chords to create what we call a double diminished chord, which is one of the most kind of impactful slap in the face chords that I know how to play. And so what we want to do is we're going to put the chord a half step above. So these are going to be two diminished chords a half step apart, just like the C diminished and the D flat diminished. And we're going to put the upper one below. So the D flat diminished is higher than the C diminished, so we're going to put that below. It doesn't sound very good the other way. And I like to keep them as tight as possible. So you can see that there's only a second in between these two. And listen to how big of a sound that is, because we have everything's arranged in these crazy major sevenths. I'm trying to sound like a big band, really just grooving, butt kicking big band, I'll totally use these double diminished. It's about as big of a sound as I know how to get on the piano. It's also worth noting that because we could start these diminished chords on any of the notes, each note of this octatonic scale is the root of its own diminished seventh chord. So as I'm playing this scale on top, we have all these diminished sevenths. All right, so how do you practice this in order to be a good jazz improviser? I would find simple intervallic patterns in your octatonic scale and then practice bringing them up and down by these minor thirds. You want to use the symmetrical principle in order to find really good vocabulary to play in these octatonic scales. So I'm going to show you 3 examples. The first I call the Horace Parlin lick. I don't know if you're familiar with Horace Parlin. He's this great pianist, was interestingly kind of crippled and only had, I think, 3 working fingers in his right hand, but still made a really great career playing with people like Dexter Gordon. And I've heard him play this lick a lot, which is, it's a descending whole step, but then he moves it around in minor thirds. Here, let me show you a little bit bigger, just in case. So you can see that from C to B flat, it's a whole step, and then he does that same thing. Instead of starting on C, he starts on E flat in the blue square. And then after he does the descending major second, descending whole step, he does the same thing starting on G flat, which is up a minor third from the E flat and the C, right? So it's... So this would go with like a C7 flat 9, like I wrote there. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you with each of these licks is that it's nice to kind of hide and disguise the fact that it's kind of this even thing going up in minor thirds. So I'm going to take the same group of notes and I'll do it in triplets. And so now you can see that the grouping doesn't fit evenly into the beat. It forms what we call a hemiola, which is when there's a grouping that doesn't fall evenly into the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That forms a really interesting rhythm, I think. Here, I'm calling this the Oscar Peterson style. I don't know that he played this lick, but he would use this whole half step plus a perfect fourth in some arpeggios. But we could do the same thing. I'm taking the notes in the red square and I'm continually moving them up by a minor third. So we're starting on C, then we're starting on E flat, then we're starting on F sharp, then we're starting on A. So this one sounds great. Pretty nifty. And again, we could put this into duple so that we don't hear da ba da da ba da da ba da da ba da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So now we get a really interesting rhythm. This one's kind of fun. A student recently pointed out that this is pretty similar to what happens in Gershwin's first prelude. Something like that. So this is, I'm calling it fourths because they're really wide intervals. It's a fourth, a perfect fourth, plus an augmented fourth. And again, these are groups of 3 notes. Each grouping is moving up by a minor third. Sounds kind of nifty, I think. And then again, we could put this in duple. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. It's kind of fun. Instead of going 3 down, it could be 3 up. Or it could be, we could use this in other ways. So you could come up with a bunch of different 2, 3, 4 note groupings and then practice moving them by these minor thirds. I made all of them go up, but it certainly could also be. It could go down by minor thirds. So I would recommend practicing both. But, and I promise we're almost done. I know this is super intense. You can also use the same principle with voicings. You could find, I'm giving you 1 3-note, 1 4-note, and 1 5-note voicing, and I'm sure that you could come up with more. So, for example, all 3 of these notes are in the octatonic scale, and so we can bring them up by minor thirds, and they will stay in the octatonic scale, right? That's the principle of a symmetrical scale. So E, B flat, and E flat. This is a voicing I might use for a C7 sharp 9, and then I'm going to bring it up. And when I was improvising at the very beginning of the video, if you can remember back to that part of your life, I was using these voicings. By the way, and this is just a total side note, you might notice, I tried to get away with that. You might notice that this is related to the concept of the tritone substitution, because the tritone is just 2 minor thirds. And these 2 voicings here would be a tritone apart, right? C, G flat. Chords a tritone apart share the same octatonic scale. So that's a big reason why the tritone substitution works. All right, here's another voicing for C7 flat 9. This is a 4-note voicing. We're going to talk more, but you can see that this features a triad on top, a major triad. Pretty cool sounding voicing, I think. Here's a 5-note voicing. This is a closed position voicing, meaning it's all within an octave. Notice that both hands are in bass clef. This is also for a C7 with a flat 9 or something like that. And you can see this looks like a C major triad, but just with this crazy little half-step rub. Pretty cool sounding. I really like with these kinds of octatonic voicings, you can separate them out. So I'm playing just the top 3 notes of the right hand, the bottom note of the right hand, and then the left hand note. Look, I'm Chick Corea. Hardly. And so, yeah, the last thing that I want to show you is there's a lot of fruitful work to be done looking for what sorts of chords you can find in this octatonic scale. And it's pretty interesting, even though it's kind of this weird scale based in, minor thirds and these half-step, whole step, crazy patterns, you can find both a major and a minor triad in this octatonic scale. Look, I've circled a major triad in the green. And so this is something you can play around with. My students, this is their favorite thing. Those are triads from the octatonic scale, right? That's Star Wars or some theme of Star Wars. E flat, C. E flat. flat, C, E flat, F sharp, E flat, C. There's also a minor triad in the octatonic scale, right? And just with the major, we know that if we have one, we're gonna have that same thing up by minor thirds because it's a symmetrical scale, right? So that's a really interesting sound. So you can also find minor seventh chords, dominant seventh chords, major sixth chords. So I encourage you to kind of look and find what other sorts of tonalities you can find within this scale because it's so rich. All right, you guys. So just a reminder, go to jeremysiskind.com, pick yourself up a little something special. I'll sign it for you. I'll make you feel real good. And like, subscribe, comment, loving the energy in this channel, and I'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye.